kia kippa, or hi gang. This week there are a lot of changes happening in the garden. We have had all of our lettuces pretty much go to seed, and this is a bit sad. This variety of lettuce is a lovely open cos style lettuce, but it does not like the sudden change to hot weather that we've been having. We've been having 28-degree days, and it's very, very warm for this time of year, and basically everything is now bolting or going to flower so that it will go to seed. And as much as I always keep a couple of lettuces to go over so I can save the seed, this has made all of our lettuce quite bitter and inedible, really. Well, not inedible, but unpleasant. So it's a new thing we're going to have to deal with, I think, is this very variable, very changing weather.
Bok, I'm Mandy O. This is Grow, Make, Cook, and welcome to my garden. I grew up in Australia in a permaculture family, but after we got married, Mr. O and I moved here to his home country of Croatia. I am a passionate and hands-on homemaker and gardener, and I love life's simple pleasures. So join me on my journey, and together we can learn to grow, make, and cook.
This is the 5th week in May, or Swibanj. It's an awful lot of salads we are not going to get to eat now. But the one thing about growing your own and gardening is that there are always swings and roundabouts, highs and lows. So let's go and prepare for another high. Down here by my radishes and just underneath the edge of my plum tree, which is looking very exciting, there are actually little baby plums forming on the tree. That's super exciting this year. It's been a couple of years since we've had a good plum harvest. But just on this edge of the garden bed, I'm preparing the soil because into here are going some real summer crops. These are my beans. This is a very reliable variety called Violetta, and it just grows and grows and grows. It's done really well for me last year and the year before, so it's a real staple variety for me now. It has these long, beautiful purple pods. The only problem is they turn bright green when you cook them, but I've got here a little tray of those, and some of them didn't sprout and some of them have sprouted too. So I'm gonna split them up, plant them out here, and hopefully train them up so that then they will meet and entangle themselves in my plum tree. Fairly firm. Now, the things with climbing beans like this is that they need a stick to climb up because they're a climbing bean. And for that, I'm using these old dogwood stems. I've got a couple of bits of old peach tree that I've cut down, anything that's quite strong and firm. And what will happen is you plant one bean at the bottom of each stick, and I'll just pop one out now. So there he goes. I've got one little bean plant there. Whoops, a bit floppy. I'll water him and he'll perk up, I think. But one of these goes at the bottom of each stick, and then he kind of twirls his way up. And then the beans are nice and easy to pick because they're just hanging off this lovely stick that grows up. So it's a nice way to grow beans, and well, it's the only way I really know how. So beans need bean sticks. Who would have thought? The other thing that I am am super excited about getting in the ground down here next to my carrots, which seem to be growing away nicely, is tomatoes. I adore tomatoes and I always try and grow some. Now, last year we got hit with blight terribly, horribly, and it was particularly bad because I was growing a lot of bush variety tomatoes which clump up and turn into, well, what they sound like really, a bush. But it didn't do much for anything, and it meant that we actually lost most of our tomatoes last year, and it was fairly devastating really. We had a little bit of success early on and then it all just went downhill. So this year, in order to combat that horrid blight, I am growing them as standards. Growing your tomato as a standard means that you grow it up a single stake and you prune out the side bits and you tie it up and you keep it upright. This is so that you can let a lot of light and air in around your tomatoes, because blight is an airborne fungus that just thrives in really humid, wet, warm weather. And that's exactly what we had a lot of. And this year, I just don't want to take the risk. So, I have dug a really deep hole for my tomato here, and you may be thinking that's a very odd thing to do. But what I'm doing is putting a handful of good sifted garden compost at the bottom, because tomatoes really like a lot of food. And then what I'm doing is I'm tipping him out, popping him down, and you can see that there are a few leaves that are going to fall below the soil line. I'm pinching them off because tomatoes will make roots on any bit of their stem that comes in contact with the soil. So I am giving the roots of the tomato a bit more water by making them much deeper down, and I'm encouraging the tomato to make a whole lot more roots. I'm hoping that this will give me a much stronger and healthier plant in the long run, and that in turn will also help protect against the blight. So in goes the stick next to the pot, and then, or maybe I'll give it a turn to try and shove it down a bit further, and then I'll tie him into there, and I think that's going to work nicely. And then the last thing that I'm doing for this tomato, which this is a new one on me actually, it's called Golden Sunrise, and it's a cocktail tomato, and it's supposed to go quite tall. So I've put reasonably tall stakes in. But the other thing that I'm doing for these hopefully delicious little yellow tomatoes is making like a little dish, the same as I do for my zucchinis, because I want to make sure that the water I put on my tomatoes is getting down into the roots and really feeding the plant. So on top of its weekly feed, it'll get really nice deep waterings. An important factor if you want delicious tomatoes. So now that these guys are all watered in, I've been starting to tie them in, which basically means tying each little bit, each little long stem to your stake. And that's to support it and allow it to grow upwards nicely and get the sunshine. But it's also to support the stems, because these guys will hopefully produce quite a lot of fruit, and you want to make sure that the entirety of the stem is supported. So I like to put ties about every 10 or 15 centimeters. Oh, I wish you guys could smell this, because chamomile, oh, it is just, I'm sure this is what heaven smells like. But these guys have been grown as a crop to be harvested. That's why I've got this enormous sweep of them here, and they are looking spectacular, and I'm tempted to keep some of them in the garden just for the beauty of them, because you can probably tell the entire thing is just swarming with bees. But I didn't grow enough last year that I could harvest for tea, and so I ran out of chamomile tea, which feels like a shame. So this year I'm ruthlessly harvesting. There is something so delightful about growing your own tea. And what with all the shortages and things that are happening at the moment, I think anything that we can do to become a little bit more self-sufficient is a step in the right direction. So, in order to turn this into tea that's going to last, well, until this time next year, hopefully, all I'm doing is gathering it up in little bundles, like that. I tie a elastic band around the end, and then hang it up in a place out of the direct sunlight to dry. If you hang it up in the sun, it will dry faster, but it tends to dry unevenly, and you lose some of the colour. So it's much prettier if you dry it in the shade. But just hang them upside down like that in little bunches so that they can air dry naturally. And then all I do is pull the flower heads off once it's dried, which will take, about a week or so in this warm weather. So they need to be crunchy to the touch. No moisture left in there at all. But for a couple of minutes picking and a week worth of drying, I get the most divine, freshly picked, no food miles tea. I don't know that I could ask for better than that. But I think that's probably about all we've got time for today. So if you like what we're doing, please like the video. If you would like to come back and visit us again, please remember to subscribe. And if you want notifications, use the bell icon below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Do widzenia.